Alright, so as of today, this is how I make a fursuit. I'm starting with a disclaimer that there is no one way to make a fursuit. There are time-honored techniques and materials, but ultimately, how a maker makes a fursuit is up to them. I start by sketching out an idea of what the base will look like to serve as reference. I use a balaclava as the innermost layer of the head. The balaclava comes with a wide hole for the eyes, so I like to add some fabric to it to leave only the eyes uncovered. These holes can be expanded if need be, but starting with the interior lining makes things easier later on. Like the balaclava, the fabric I use for this is synthetic and athletic because it's soft but tough and made not to get as hot as linen or cotton. Next, I move on to the foam base itself. I like to start with the shape like a skull firmly around the head. To get this smooth shape, I cut the shapes from a pattern and then sew them together before attaching this to the head with some spray adhesive. Once this is done, I try to mark approximations of where the eyes are under the foam. Some suits will have more of a blind spot than others, but I like to minimize that. If it can't be avoided, I like to track the size of it. I also draw a gist of what the face will look like, so I know where to put elements like the mouth and the brow. To assemble the pieces that add on to the base, I turn to my reference sketch and I pick up the tape measure. I try to estimate what the basic measurements will be for the piece. In this case, it's the top snout, just because I always start with the top snout. I get the height, length, and width, like it's the dimensions of a box. And I actually do start snouts by building a sort of open box with these dimensions. Once I have the basic snout size, you'll see me cut off the corners and add more pieces of foam, rounding those out as well. It doesn't have to be totally finished for me to put it on the base, but I like for it to be mostly finished. From there, I like to lead directly into the cheek areas and the bottom jaw around the same time. For the cheeks and brow, I'll use some thin paper, sometimes tape, to get an accurate measure of the base shape around the bottom of the piece. Now's a good time to talk about materials. For glue, I use Gorilla hot glue sticks because they're a tad bit stronger than regular hot glue sticks. It's not a dramatic difference, but it's enough for me to spring for the extra cost, personally. The foam I use is light density craft foam from Fairfield, one roll of ½ inch thickness and one roll of 1 inch thickness. Denser foam is more difficult to carve, but it makes for much smoother shapes than this. But it's also principally heavier, and I like for my suits to be as lightweight as possible. Again, just a personal preference. I don't mind the rougher shapes because in my experience, once fabric is added on top of it, it doesn't make a huge difference. However, I do have to keep an eye on it as I work. While I'm doing this, let's take a moment to check the method about fursuit base shapes. A fursuit's base is one of the most important factors in how it looks. Getting it right is important, but it can be tricky. Most fursuits will either be covered in fur, or in this case, fleece. Fabric, but especially fur, adds bulk. Ever see a hairless animal that usually has fur? Like a hairless cat or a bear? They look unrecognizable. When you make a fursuit base, you want to take into consideration the bulk of the fabric you're putting on top of it. Do not underestimate this. Your base, compared to the final thing, will look somewhat like a hairless cat looks like compared to a furred one. The snout should look too long, the eyes and ears too big, and the whole thing will be sort of gaunt looking. Conversely, on real animals, areas of long, thick fur or feathers will really fill out the frame. In most cases, fursuit makers will be using luxury shag or a similar fur, which have piles of 1 to 2 inches only. So in this case, you'll want the foam to help bulk up what the fur cannot. It's a balancing act. Along with smothering shapes, fur will bury your suit's expression if you're not careful. So depending on how toony you want to be, you will want to exaggerate. Shoot for a smidge more toony than you wish to end up with on your final suit. Other notes on bases. Most fursuits have a bit of an overbite. Keep in mind, the height of the snout needs to be what you want on the face and the angle of the slope. The cheeks and brow areas are essential to expression. And fur is heavy, so big ears will flop if not reinforced. Got all that? Good. Back to the time lapse. From here, there's a lot less to say. I'm not accounting for bulk very much because aside from some hair, this suit will be fleece. If you are a beginning suit maker, I recommend that you absolutely make sure that you like your base. Remake it if you have to. Or just skip the whole thing and get a base from someone else. Despite all the creative legwork, a base is a lot cheaper to make than a finished suit, not to mention faster. There's a chance a maker you like will take base commissions, so, politely ask them if they do. Ta-da! This is the finished thing. The next episode will cover, get it, cover, adding the fabric part of the suit. If you liked this, please hit like or let me know down in the comments. Thanks for watching.